Darrington. I am from Akron, Ohio. I have 19 years in recovery from opiate use disorder, mental illness, and complex trauma.
Well, thanks so much for coming out and joining us. We really appreciate taking the time, and especially on a Saturday too. So if you could start off by sharing a bit about your childhood.
Okay. So on the outside, my childhood looked pretty normal. I grew up on 180 acres of farmland in North Summit County, Ohio. I had two parents. I lived on the family farm, so we had grandma and grandpa across the creek, aunt and uncle up the hill, another cousin over across the road, so there were a lot of family that was pretty close, but I lost that. There was a lot of death in our family at that older generation, and the younger generation ended up closing up the farm, and everybody moved and scattered. So when I was about, I want to say it was around 7, I went from having a very close family to it being very dispersed and us starting to really have separate lives that weren't really involved.
Gotcha. And are you an only child?
I am an only child.
Okay. So that can be even more, not having those cousins and whatnot around, a bit isolating. So at what age did you start your use, and what did it do for you?
Okay. So I started my use of illicit substances at 16, which is, in my mind, is neither young nor old. It's just an age. I was in because I was that weird kind of kid, I did find my tribe, but it wasn't a very healthy tribe. And so by 14, I was sort of surrounding myself with older, high-risk behavior, and drugs were around. And for 2 years, 14 and 15, I'm not doing that. I see what happens to people when they do that. But when you're around that over and over again, it becomes normalized, and you have a bad day, you're stressed out, you just want to let loose, and all of a sudden somebody says, here. And I found my drug of choice right away. So I didn't start with the softer drugs and kind of tippy-toe into it. I found opiates right off the bat. And the first time I did it, I was like, I need to get more of this in my life. So at that point, it was doing all of the good things that it does, and none of the bad things. And I got a few years where my use, I felt like I was in control. I didn't feel like I had developed a habit. I wasn't using daily. And then when I was around 17 or 18, I started realizing, oh, this is becoming more and more of my life.
Okay, yeah. And did you, at any point in time, try to stop or control it?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Well, it was, rationalization and justification. It was, I'm going to try this. I'm going to use less. I'm going to put some more space between this. I'll use another substance instead of this one. And then I'm dependent on both of them. And, I came up with all of the solutions that my small little brain could come up with at that time. And none of them were working. And the more they didn't work, the less I wanted to talk to anybody about the problem.
And at what point did family or friends or employer say anything to you about it?
By the time I was 15 years old, I rode BMX freestyle. Okay. And I was the first sponsored female freestyler ever. And because of that, at 15, I was going around the country, competing, doing shows, doing tours, videos, magazine shoots, stuff like that. So I started not going to school on a full-time basis. I still had to do school, but I didn't have to sit in class 5 days a week like most people. And I was flying around the country without any adult supervision. So, if you think about, I'm already starting to fall into a kind of like a sub-society. And now I have this, I'm basically running my life at 15.
Right.
And, by 18, I had gotten myself into just a little bit of trouble at that point.
Gotcha. So how did your disease progress then to the point that you said, I got to do something different?
My tolerance grew to the point that I could no longer get access to my illicit drug supply in the amounts that I needed to sustain my dependency. And so I started to increase my high-risk criminal behavior. I started doing more and more extreme things more and more frequently. Those things are illegal, so I started attracting the attention of law enforcement and detectives. I'm crossing state lines with substances on a regular basis. I'm flying around the country with substances on a regular basis. The thing that I actually got caught for, I was glad I got caught for, because they could have got me for a lot worse stuff. But I ended up in the court systems. I was the first treatment in lieu of conviction case in Summit County. I didn't know that until like about 12 years after the whole thing that I was in recovery. But yeah, somebody's like, yeah, you were the first one. And I had just graduated college. I was 24 and just finished college, and may have borrowed some drugs from a hospital pharmacy and got caught. And they said, if you go to treatment, we might be able to put you where if you can make it through the whole 2-year process, you won't have to have these charges. So I was like, and again, remember I told you I was good in school. If you told me what I needed to do, I could check the boxes. I did that in court. So instead of going deep and finding out about my substance use disorder, I was basically, what do I need to do to get this court off my back? So there wasn't a whole lot of recovery. I went through the motions. I went to meetings. I got a sponsor. I put on the suit and went to court. I was a gold star pupil. But in terms of recovery really starting to infiltrate my soul, that was not happening during this phase of my recovery. I did get a few years, but I couldn't consistently stop using substances on a 100% consistent basis. I would go months, sometimes years without using, and then I would save it all up for a weekend blowout. And I was able to have these episodes of use and then stop and go back to work and go back to life and people. And that worked for a few years. And then one of those weekends, those breaks that happened on that Sunday night where I could go to work on Monday, that didn't happen. And I couldn't figure out what happened. I was like, wait a minute, this is how I do it.
Right. This has been working.
Yeah. And the next 9 months were absolutely devastating. That's where I lost the jobs and the houses and the kids, and it was bad. And humbled me. It humbled me because it was exceptionally humiliating. And I thought I was going to die. And all the good people that I had learned in recovery basically turned their back on me at that point. So I learned who my friends were when I went through that particular return to use. And I changed some of the things that I knew about my recovery practice at that point. I really started adding in the multiple pathways of recovery, the physical, the emotional, the social, the environmental, the spiritual. How do I move in small incremental steps towards wellness on all of those dimensions, those 4 dimensions of recovery: health, home, purpose, and community. So at that point, because I had nothing to lose, I went deep into my recovery at that point. And I got to know me probably for the first time. I'm not the cause of this problem. That given some of the things that I experienced, using substances made a lot of sense at that time. And then they outlived their usefulness. And it was time to put that tool down and figure out what other tools I needed to use to have a quality life. I was a parent. I have 2 children. I have very different roles in their life. I had lost custody of my 4-year-old, regained custody when they were 5, was pregnant a second time with a second crisis pregnancy, in treatment, all the things. Did not believe that I had a lot of experience failing and not a lot of experience succeeding. So the worst thing that I could think was ending up with both of my children in foster care. So my second child, I made an adoption plan for it, 5 months in recovery. And no one can really explain to you what that is going to be like. And that was incredibly transformational. And that was probably the first time that I was willing to sit with all the feelings. And because I was like, if I don't know how to manage all of these overwhelming feelings, I'm going to use again. And I'm desperate not to.
Right. Yeah. Yes. What does your recovery life look like today?
Okay, so I include physical health and wellness. I don't know. It's just keeping myself, again, in that physical, emotional, social, Environmental, so keeping my home like as my little sanctuary, my little safe place. I like cats, so animals in general. I foster baby kittens for a rescue. So there's just various things that I do on a regular basis to kind of keep myself in a good place. So just kind of taking small digestible steps to stay well on a daily basis. I do have co-occurring disorders, which means I have a head that sometimes I wake up and it's not my friend. So, I make sure that I take a look at my therapeutic interventions, both pharmacological and physical and behavioral, that I'm keeping myself as well as possible. And then the days that it's not good, I give myself grace to call off sick.
Yes.
And knowing I have some PTO.
Right. What have you learned from yourself from your addiction and your recovery?
I am absolutely incredibly hard to kill. I've survived things, including my own desire not to live anymore. I've stayed alive. I work in government relations at this point, doing recovery advocacy and policy work, and I go up against big systems that don't want to change and don't really see us as full human beings worthy of dignity, respect, and kindness and quality services. And I love those challenges. I love pushing rocks up hills, and I love it when they go over the top and start rolling down easier on the backside. So I think I'm perfectly suited because of the accumulation of my experiences during my substance use disorder and when I had to survive, to do the system change work and advocacy, not only to change big systems, but to really help motivate and engage people who are trying to seek or sustain their own recovery efforts right now. I have this recovery community organization that I started last year. And when I say I started it, I basically connected dots. I have the support of 5 wonderful board members that are all participating members of recovery, who have worked in this recovery space professionally for a lot of years. So it's a collective effort. And all I'm doing is basically having conversations and connecting things so that they're allowed to do more of the work that they're doing. I would love for this Summit Recovery Hub model not just to make recovery in Summit County flourish, but to it to be a scalable model to implement in urban, rural, and suburban areas around the state of Ohio, and then maybe create some sort of fidelity model in conjunction with other recovery community organizations around the country who are also doing phenomenal work, so that we can make a handbook of, if you want to do this in your community, here's how to do it. We'll help you, provide technical assistance. I would love if I could figure out some way to fund temporary foster care for the animals that need homes while their people go get treatment. Yes. I get asked that all the time because they know I do foster care for animals. And I've done it, but I've also ended up with animals that people haven't come back for that are now living at my house, and I can only do that so much before I end up with 100 of them. I would love to figure out how to do that for people, because I know a lot of people who don't go to treatment when they know they need to because they can't leave their dog.
Right.
Yeah.
If you could share some inspiration or hope that has really spoken to you when you've been struggling, not necessarily in active use, but on those days that, that are kind of dark or it's a struggle, some words that, that ring true for you.
I have a magnet on my refrigerator from Winston Churchill that he said this during the bombings of London during World War II. It said, when you're going through hell, keep going. Just don't stop. Don't give up. Don't sit there. Right? I know it's scary to put one foot in front of the other, but that's the only way we get places.
Right. Yes. That's beautiful. Is there anything that we missed that you would like to be able to talk about?
Just how rewarding it is to participate in this recovery community organization capacity building. It is a non-clinical, low barrier, open access facility that provides services that are just, it's not rocket science. It's just a safe place to have a safe person, to have a safe conversation about what you see as problematic behaviors, or relationships, people, places, things. And then what do you think you want to do about that? And we might be able to kind of give you an array of options you may not have known about, or some resources that are out there that could help alleviate some of the immediate stuff going on. I want everybody to have a tasting menu of recovery offerings and a concierge service of putting it on a silver platter and walking beside you as you take a little taste of this or that and find the perfect recovery practice that you can live with day in and day out, hopefully for the rest of your life.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for coming out and joining us. This has been fantastic, and I know your story is going to help somebody who out there is struggling and being able to see that there's really a wonderful world out there.
There is. Absolutely.
Thank you.